Namaste, everyone, and welcome to our Revive session, which we're having after a fair amount of time, but I'm really happy to welcome you back here. My name is Manisha Gutman, and I am working with a group called eCoexist. eCoexist is a social enterprise, and we also have the eCoexist Foundation that works on several environmental and green livelihoods issues. Last year, during the lockdown period, during COVID, we started this series, this web series of discussions called Revive, which was a way to help people stay connected and to also discuss what was happening and to explore together what a new paradigm that might emerge after the lockdown period. The Revive series has addressed several environmental issues. We have a web page which you can visit, and also several of these discussions are up on YouTube that you can revisit and hear. Today, I am very happy to welcome with us Dr. Michael Held from Rome, Italy. And he is going to be speaking about a topic. The topic chosen is conscious self-healing. And he's going to be speaking about integrative medicine. We also have with us a Mona doctor, a dear friend who's based in Mumbai. She is on the panel with me, and we are going to be discussing further with Dr. Held about his work. And at the end of the talk, towards the second half, we will be opening up the discussion to all of you as well. We're a small group here today, so we will be able to take questions, I'm hoping. In the meantime, if you have questions that come up while Dr. Held is speaking, you can also use the Q&A box, type in your questions, and I will be tracking your questions and making sure that they are posed to Dr. Held as he is speaking. So I'd just like to say a few words about Dr. Michael Held. I came into contact with him through a common friend. Dr. Held lives with his wife, Vienna, in Rome, in Italy. He has practiced and he has expertise in several forms of medicine. He has studied homeopathy, homotoxicology. He has studied nutrition, acupuncture, and other aspects of natural medicine. He's a member of several medical societies, and he has a clinical practice that he continues both in the countries of Germany and Italy. I am very excited to have him here with us today because the subject of health and healing obviously has been the main focus on everybody's minds for this entire year of 2020 and moving forward into 2021. All of us have realized how fragile and temporary our lives can be. A lot of fear has also come up for many of us. And questioning around how does one really stay aware of one's own body, and how does one keep one's body and mind healthy. So we're going to be talking about these issues. The other thing I'd like to tell you about Dr. Held is that he's also a student of Buddhism, and he has been studying Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. And that's why he's such a special guest today, because he's going to be speaking to us about how nature self-regulates from within us, and how the healing process is constantly going on within us, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we are conscious of it or not. And that's why the topic we chose today was conscious self-healing, because partly what we'd like to do with Dr. Held in this talk, and hopefully others to follow, is to see how does one make this self-regulatory process, how can we become conscious of it, how can we become conscious of it so that we assist it and we're not resisting it, or we're not doubting that this healing process is going on. So with that brief introduction, I'd like to welcome Dr. Held. Thank you for joining us today, and please go ahead, and I'm here to help with whatever you need help with.
Thank you very much, Manisha. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me. So good afternoon to all of you. And my name is Michael. I'm a German doctor working in Roma in Italy, and I deal with integrated medicine for more than 30 years. Integrated medicine means that I apply a combination of various natural medicine techniques, and as you mentioned, like homeopathy, acupuncture, plant therapy, nutrition. I also use what is called automolecular medicine, which is a use of vitamins and minerals. And when it's needed, also fresh food is always better. I'm using manual therapy, and I apply also relaxation techniques, and together with my team that I will present later. Also, if I treat mainly as a homeopath, many problems and diseases, the focus of my practice is chronic disease, digestion, and stress disorders. Stress in all its forms, psychological, physical, mental, toxins in the environment, problems with the nutrition. Stress has many causes, and that's very interesting because the stress reaction, also if the reasons and the causes are very different, the cascade inside our body is always the same. We call our approach positive medicine. And by that, I mean not the opposite of negative medicine, but the interception of the infinite rows and pathways that our organism takes at every moment to create the best situation in given circumstances. Positive means a direction, the inner pole to which the inner regulating health processes are always directed. It's an alignment. A simple example, if I cut myself with a knife in the kitchen, the whole direction of my body, from internal reactions like stimulating the immune system and the complex processes of skin healing, to external actions like putting a bandage on the wound or calling a doctor for help. Our body as a whole, complex and coordinated system, always works in the direction of healing and health. And this is also the focus of my daily work, shifting the focus from disorders to disease to dynamic balance and health. So in our approach, positive medicine is above all the direction of health. To intercept what blocks or slows down or what changes and deviates natural processes in the patient's body, which is always understood as a whole, as a functional unit, I dedicate a lot of time to the first visit. And this kind of approach is generally called narrative medicine, which often allows from the story of the patient's everyday life, let's say from the outside to the inside, from the spoken word to what works inside us, each of us in any moment, usually in silence. The silence in our body is interrupted when something is going wrong. And that is what in medicine is called a symptom, initially a sign that something is out of balance and something should be observed and eventually changed and modified. And at this point, one of the potential problematics of modern symptom-oriented medicine becomes evident. The medicine silences this inner voice, this call, but this time it is a misleading silence, because the silence no longer means inner dynamic balance, but suppression without having understood the cause of the symptom. And this can have negative consequences, obviously. Imagine someone lost in a big forest in the Himalayas and calls for help. We hear his voice, but being in the mountains, it will echo and it's very difficult to pinpoint the direction of the call. In our body, the same thing can happen. For example, the pain can be in the head, but the root of the problem is in the digestion tract and in the liver. And if we silence the caller, the symptoms too early, we, as we like to find our friend or the person who got lost, may run in the wrong direction and lose precious time to help him and to find him. So symptoms are first warning signs, like the lights on a dashboard in a car that light up when the gas is running out.
Sorry, Michael, can I just interrupt?
Of course.
Can I request you not to cover your mouth with your hand?
Because
we can't hear you very clearly. Sorry about that.
Yeah. sorry. Okay. Yeah. So as I said, we have a dashboard, we're in the car, and we, instead of thinking what is the problem that the light came up, we switch off the light. So if the light was that there is a lack of gas, obviously we have a problem, because switching off the light, the car will stop, and we don't, and we will not be in the place where we wanted to go. So what does it mean in the body? It means that the next symptom which comes up is often more serious, because the disease has progressed deeper without being noticed. So each symptom is an expression of the language of one's own body, and in some way speaks to us about the whole. And first of all, it speaks to the patient and not to the doctor. And this is the first step of self-regulation and of self-healing. Listening. Learning to listen inside ourselves. Like every doctor, obviously I ask what the symptoms are, but I also ask a very detailed account of the patient's daily life, his family, his daily commitments, his relationships, his interests, his work, everything. Because each aspect can be a key to the patient's life. Each aspect can be the trace that leads into the problem that brought the patient to me as a doctor. In addition to this narrative part, I complete the diagnostic part by checking all the examinations that the patient has already done, and if necessary, I prescribe other tests to complete the diagnostic and get the most complete information about my patient's mostly always chronic situation. But I first of all follow my impression and my experience and what I can see and sense myself without any technical device. But to be clear, the positive medical approach doesn't exclude anything and doesn't exclude device medicine, but use it as little as possible and only when it's needed. I always try to avoid too many tests and exams and use conventional medicine, especially in diagnostics, and the therapy always the most natural and less invasive approach. Sorry, I didn't activate do you see my presentation?
No, not yet. You can go ahead and start. You can start it now.
Okay, started. Okay. It's blocked. Okay. Do you see it?
Not yet.
Okay. Unfortunately, the screen is blocked.
No, you need to, you know how to share screen from the green button at the bottom.
Yes, but I don't see it. Okay. Okay.
Yes, that's working now. We can see it. If you can
it's
just
working?
go, yeah,
okay.
you can just go full screen now.
Yes. Here we are. You see it?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So here we are. Sorry for that. Okay. So do you hear me? Sorry. Okay. Hello?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So as I said, I cooperate. My practice is cooperating with a network of professionals, with osteopaths, nutritionists, physiotherapists, and different specialists from doctors like dermatologists and also surgeons and other specialists if needed. And all professionals should always, sorry, there's a confusion. Okay, it's going on by yourself. I don't know why. Okay, so but especially all these doctors, especially I work together with my wife, Rihanna. She's a medical anthropologist, and I often directly involved in the treatment of my patients, and she's doing the meditation techniques and mindfulness and CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. I've just finished a master degree in PNA, which is a relatively new medical discipline that relates the four main networks that work together all times in our organism, which is psychology, neurology, endocrinology, and immunology. Shortly, PNA. I give you a simple and simplified example. Cortisol is a hormone that regulates a wide range of processes throughout the body, including metabolism and the immune response. It also has a very important role in helping the body respond to stress. Mostly all of us here together have had a slight increase in cortisol, and like me, especially in this moment, because of the problem with the presentation. Because the hormone is especially an adaptation hormone. It makes us more active and concentrated so that we can communicate better. But if suddenly a very loud noise happens outside our windows and the house suddenly shakes, the cortisol level shoots up, our hearts beat fast, our emotion and senses are stimulated to the maximum, and we flee outside the house. Now imagine that on the run you hit your hand on the door and have a small wound that becomes inflamed and risks becoming infected. 3 times your cortisol level rises, but each time for a different reason. Mental stimulation while listening, emotional instinctive stress reaction to the loud noise, physical anti-inflammatory stimulation to heal the wound, mental, emotional, physical triggers for the rise of a single substance. Our body always works on all levels and uses its substances everywhere. Everything is connected to everything. Nothing exists in our body on its own. That is why the same substances are used for different functions. Nature also in us is practical and mostly economical on its energy levels, simply because it knows about limited resources. This is not only the heart of a new discipline, the PNA, the psycho-neuroendocrino-immunology, and not only its positive medicine. This is much, much more a highly developed, fascinated system that is self-regulating and always active in each of us in every moment. Self-regulation, self-healing, nature in us. It's very easy and very sophisticated, and it's very beautiful. It's amazing. But one question that arises is how conscious action that are all above our mental processes could become disruptive factors in this perfect system. It seems as if we had thought ourselves out of nature. Even though the separation of mind is dominant in our Western worldview, it remains only an imaginary reality and not a true one. And yet the consequences of man experience himself separated first from nature and then from his body are enormous, with severe repercussions on all levels of relationships. Within us, between us, and between us and the entire nature, the plant and the animal world. I will come back to our topic of this mind-body interaction in a moment, but I would already like to mention that also we always risk disturbing or even sabotaging the self-regulatory processes within us through our lifestyle, and especially our mental processes. In this friction and this tension, there lies an opportunity opens up to consciously experience, to observe, to understand, to participate in, and even strengthens these self-regulation processes. This shows different levels of self-regulation. Sorry, I have a problem with the screen.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
If you just go, if you go to the full screen button on your bottom left, it'll open up. On the bottom left, yeah, click on that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and you can use the top and down arrow to move forward and backwards.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's clear. Okay, here we are. So this shows different levels of self-regulation, as you can see also in this slide. At the first natural level, all unconscious self-regulation and self-healing processes. On this next level, processes and conscious actions that are healthy for the body, such as eating well and exercising. On the next level, different stages of self-knowledge, from looking inwards until the natural processes are not only understood and seen, but can be consciously influenced, modified, and controlled. Now let's try to understand how we can move from a basic, usually perfectly in us working self-regulation to a self-regulation upgrade. For this purpose, an image. Let's imagine that each of us lives in a large house. You can see it here. On several floors, many rooms with partly open doors, but mostly closed doors, and many of them even without a key. Nevertheless, you are the owner of this big house and therefore have all the rights not only to get to know the house completely, but also to use it. It is your house. No one else has a right to it, and above all, very importantly, no one else has the key to the front door. And so it is with our body. It is our house, our home, the only place where we can live. And if we disappear, if we leave one day, no one will be able to take our place in exactly the same way. Home and owner, on this level at least, are one. But just as we don't know our big house, just as much or even less we know our body. To stay in this metaphor, let us imagine a very modern house with automatic heating, or in India with automatic cooling, and other automatic systems active in all the rooms, even when the rooms are not in use. A simple example to symbolize the mechanics that run in our body, known or unknown, at every moment, and what is more important, at every moment, this mechanism creates the very best situation, the very best order in the house, the very best situation in our body. Our body creates, to a large extent, without our knowledge, without our actively doing, the best possible physical and psychological and emotional condition on all levels. Our heart beats, our lungs move, our digestion is working, our immune system defends us, our blood flows and nourishes every single cell, and we don't even have to observe, and we don't have to tell them to do what they are doing. Everything happens without our doing, but as we will see, everything follows nature's laws and orders. So, where's the I? Who is the me? And how many? A difficult question, but for now, please remember that we are very often our first adversary, sometimes our first enemy. And I will come back to this too. Natural medicine has always been what modern medicine is in the process of becoming, a personalized medicine. What is common in both approaches is that the individual and not the human being in general is being researched. The difference lies in the instruments and in the approaches. On the one hand, a natural approach with different techniques. On the other hand, the high-tech medicine and research. In modern medicine today is usually used the research in the third person perspective. That means the researcher investigates in his laboratory for objectively usable values in order to define a condition, an imbalance, a disease, something out of a defined range. This is a very helpful tool in many circumstances, but conscious self-healing requires a first-person, inward-looking perspective, which most of us have to learn or have had to learn in order to understand themselves better. In the metaphor of the house, this means unlocking doors and entering rooms that one did not know before, or step by step, first finding the keys lost in the house in order to be able to open doors and enter unknown spaces. I want to do a little test with all of you to give you an idea of the mechanism in us. So I ask you a simple question. Do you know where exactly is your right foot in this moment? Where is your left hand and how came they in this precise positions? Did you tell them to do so? Probably not. Very few of us would be able to answer this simple question spontaneously. Is your right leg over or under the left leg? Where are your hands and your fingers and why are they moving? Not to be aware of these movements raises the question of who told our hand or our foot where to move and where to rest. It is not easy to give this someone a name, but it is enough to realize and remember that someone is acting in our house whom we do not know. And the next question that comes up are, is it a thief, an intruder, a friend, a me, a you? Who is it? As I just said, it is not easy to define this mover within us. And the whole thing becomes even much more complicated. It becomes more complicated because not only our body has its own life, but also our thoughts, our feelings. They happen. To recognize, to experience it in oneself is the easiest thing in the world. So please, take your watch or your iPhone, look at it closely, and try not to think about a pink elephant with big ears flying across your desk for 1 minute. Exactly 1 minute, and remember always, I have to forget the pink elephant over my head. If you can do this, you have come a long way on the path of conscious self-control. But most of us will not be able to get the pink elephant out of their heads for all the 60 seconds. Thoughts are inside us, in our heads, and perhaps in other places. They flow inside us non-stop and are hard to grasp and even harder to control. But the good thing is, it is possible. And this control is a part of conscious self-healing. But what does it mean that we don't control our mind? It means that our brain and its function are not entirely ours. Think about it. If the brain, our thoughts, were really our thoughts, then each of us, even in problematic situations, would think only of the problem solving and not of possible other future complications or long ago concerns from the past. Each of us knows that it makes no sense to deal with two worlds which do not exist. One is the past and the other is the future. And yet they form the focus of a big part of our minds and our thoughts. I repeat, if our minds, our mental processes were really ours, who would allow unnecessary negative thoughts? No one would. So I summarize. Our psychosomatic constitution with all its functions happens largely on natural but mechanical processes. And I repeat, our body creates always the best possible situation every moment. And that means it creates its highest level of health at every moment in specific conditions. But should it work in this automatic mode? The answer is yes and no. Yes, because of energy efficiency. And no, or at least not always, because consciousness can refine and upgrade the system. The good thing about mechanism and mechanical processes as a general rule is that they can be modified and improved the better you understand them. And that is exactly the starting point of positive medicine. Understanding natural mechanism in order to heal. Our body does not wait for doctors, for healers, and for medicine. Imbalances up to severe illnesses also follow natural processes in the sense of insufficient inner healing attempts or insufficient inner compensations, which are no longer sufficient, but often become the causes of illness themselves. An example, where self-regulation reaching its limits and becomes a cause of pain itself. After an accident, I have a chronic pain in my right knee, and therefore I walk in a crooked posture and put less weight on the injured knee. Until at some point, after a few weeks, not only my injured knee, but also my right hip and my left knee suffer from this. The protective posture for the right knee becomes trigger for complaints in other localization. In this case, in the left knee and the right hip. So let me summarize again. In our body, in our house, many countless things happen of which we have no idea, but which fortunately always go in one direction, and that direction is called health. Our house is looking for balance and a dynamic order. And how and with what does it do that? As described earlier, our house is a very modern house, absolutely high-tech. Let me give you a quick figure about the numbers operating in our body. In order to carry out all the processes that take place in all our cells, in all our organs, in 1 second, we would need factories and equipment that would take up 500 acres of land. But before we try to understand the high-tech only of our house, let's first deal with the basic equipment, electricity and water. Every single one of the rooms in our big house is connected by electricity and water pipes, just as every part in our body is connecting to any other part, directly or indirectly. All parts are in communication with each other all our time. Everything talks to everything, only we are not always allowed to have a say. And that is often a good thing, at least as long as this talking does become a disturbing factor. To understand how something intangible like a thought can influence our lives, I would like to share with you what I understood for myself in its simplicity only a few weeks ago, but have not yet fully embraced in its extent for my medical understanding. But I hope that it will be of use of you already at this stage, and I would also be glad to hear your opinion about it later in our discussion. It is about a series of consequences, and it begins in the intangible, in the invisible, with a thought. You can't really measure it, but it's there, and as I will explain here, it determines our lives. Many of us will have heard of someone who suffers from an obsessive compulsive disorder. That means they can let go of certain thoughts, which often lead them to obsessive actions. And that is the sick side. On the other hand, many of you have directly and often experienced the beneficial effects that come from repeating sacred words or names in mantras. Both, in the same way, produce effects in our bodies that can be measured. For example, as changes in brain waves or as adrenaline and cortisol in a blood test. In the first case, the stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol, and in the second, calming substances such as serotonin. And this is the first passage in the sequence I want to explain to you. Something intangible, like a thought, becomes a substance measurable like the stress hormone adrenaline. And when adrenaline rises in the body, it produces a variety of changes, such as increased heartbeat, faster breathing, increased muscle tension, increased alertness, reduced digestion. In short, everything is ramped up to be more reactive. This is good when we are in danger and need to react quickly, but is harmful when this inner cocktail in the laboratory of our body is not matched by anything external which corresponds. And this is exactly what happens when we are permanently stressed. A disharmony between what you experience, for example, you're sitting in your living room and everything is quiet and normal, and what your body is experiencing. With a stress hormone, it senses danger and it alarm reaction. And this brings up to the next step of the sequence, which goes first from the intangible thought to the substrate circulating in the body, and now to an action outside. The substances demand to be called into action, and if the relation is not right, then the free stress hormones tend to become stressful action. Typical discharges for stress compensation are eating too much, especially sweets and chocolate, or drinking too much alcohol, or taking other harmful substances. Or one becomes very nervous and behaves improperly with someone who is nearby, like the partner, the children, the colleagues at work, or friends. The stress hormones often leads to inadequate actions, mostly unconscious, and often unintentionally. But that does not change the fact that this misbehavior has consequences. And this is the last step of the sequences. The wrong actions have consequences in everyday life and then even become our destiny. In terms of health, if we have eaten or drunk too much for a long time, we get ill. Or socially, if we lose our friends or perhaps even our jobs because we have behaved in an impossible way for a long time. The simple sequence, intangible thought, measurable substance, quality of our actions with consequences on our whole life shows an important, easily understandable phenomenon. The quality of our thoughts determines our everyday life. The intangible creates our world. And this brings me to another potential of inner self-healing. When we understand our inner self, nourish and cultivate it properly on all levels, then we create the ideal conditions to create our own contribution to a more harmonious outer world. If, as described above, the invisible thoughts are conscious and healthy, then our external circumstances will also follow this tendency. This is also the case with compassion, which is a central topic in Buddhism and other traditions. So I repeat, the intangible creates the tangible. A very important point in the sequence is that on each of the 4 levels described, thought, substrate, action, and destiny, the mutual influence and determination is always effective in 2 directions, as feedback and as feed forward. For the worse with negative thoughts, too much stress hormones and bad actions, and for the better with positive thoughts, balanced hormone and neurotransmitter levels, and adequate and positive actions. We can change our mind to change our brain and our body, and from there, everyone on his level, our outer world. from self-directed neuroplasticity with morphological and functional changes in our brain to self-directed improvement of external life environments. Every one of us can do a little better. Inner and outer spaces can be connected consciously. The self from self-healing moves in the direction of more harmony, in the direction of deeper understanding, and perhaps the little self becomes a higher self. In conclusion, we have moved from the description of the largely unconscious natural processes of self-regulation to the description of self-regulation to conscious self-healing, which is the highest degree, leads beyond the individual to connectedness, not only with other people, but with the environment as a whole. I have mentioned earlier three categories of self-healing. Firstly, the consciousness occurring processes, and secondly, the consciously influencing processes through healthy behavior, such as healthy diet, sufficient physical exercise, adequate sleep, stress reduction, healthy lifestyle, social contacts and activities. The third category of self-healing, as described, requires a higher level of self-awareness, a greater understanding of nature in the broadest sense. This part has its basis, the self-health strategy mentioned above, but requires a deeper conscious look at yourself. There are many ways and techniques to do this, the best known of which are provided by the waste field of meditation. In this introduction to self-healing, I think it's not the place to go further into the subject of meditation because it's big and so important concerning self-regulation and self-healing and requires much more time. I would like to come back to the metaphor of our house as a symbol of our body. And I ask myself, if our body can unconsciously coordinate billions of reactions at the same time to ensure our health, how is it that we not only cannot control our thoughts, but in the worst case, as we have seen, they can even be the root for diseases of any kind? This may seem a paradox, but at least a trace of an answer could be found. But before I share it with you, a description of what is going on in our body in every moment. Everything flows, everything is changing, everything is in a continuous transformation, searching for the best adaptation. Everything has a rhythm, such as the heartbeat and the resulting blood circulation. Everything flows and follows specific paths and takes place in circumscribed spaces. This corresponds, as mentioned before, to our water and electricity circuits in our big house. Our thoughts also flow, but seemingly widely and disorderly, and without a fixed destination, without a beginning and without an end. In neuroscience, we call this mind wandering. But nothing happens by chance in our house. And as we have seen, everything follows the principle of creating order, or respectively, of maintaining health. If everything is order, then the seemingly aimless drifting of our thoughts, the disorder of our thoughts, also belongs to an order. But what sense could this disorder have, as if the thoughts, small and large, important and unimportant, logical and illogical, were only rushing wildly and without goal back and forth in the big house from one floor to the other, from one room to the other, from one closed door to the other. Always searching, but for what? And the answer is probably that they are looking for danger and problems. For this reason, they are attracted by sounds, by smells, by all sensory impression, but also by memories and possible future experiences. The guardians and sentinels who have to guard a large house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they race from one impression to the next to prevent any potential danger. So too, our jumping back and forth from one subject to the other, usually unconsciously and unfocused, forms a cornerstone of self-regulation. But even though mind wandering is a constant flow that is part of our self-regulatory system, it is not an optimal situation. To stay with the metaphor of the house, thoughts have taken on a role that does not correspond to them. They have upset the organic realm and are creating disorder. For various reasons, they have become the inappropriate owner of the house, and that is our problem. They decide beyond their areas of competence and create in most of us not only a wrong image of ourselves, but of what is going on in the world around us. And this also shows us how important it is for all of us to better understand the self-regulatory processes within us. If, with patience and perseverance, we succeed in putting our house in better order and finally becoming the owner of our house, that means we understand much better networks operating in our body in its whole. This will have multiple positive effects, and the meaning, the essential sense of health, will probably show itself in a new light. It is known that negative stimuli get much more attention circulation than positive ones. And this is normal in this sense, because in a problem, in a negativity, there could be a danger. Nature probably did not foresee in our modern lifestyle with maximum stimulus overload, and we live a culture which looks more and more outwards to others and to objects and less inwards. But that is our present. Fortunately, each of us has a piece of healthy nature within us that everyone can better understand and nurture. As seen, it starts with very simple things like good and healthy food, where every part, body, mind, and spirit, should be well nourished. Our inner doctor is humble and works silently within us. If we consciously create silence within us, he or she is likely to speak louder and clearer to us. As I said earlier, health and self-healing begins in silence and in the intangible. But it seems that this silence and tangibility wants to be heard and understood. What happens in everyone is that everyone can actively participate in it, alone by sharing, or, as I had the opportunity today, with others. Thank you for your attention, and thank you so much, Manisha, for having me here organizing this event. Hello?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That was really wonderful. We have a little more time if you would like to speak a little more, or else we can now invite Mona. We have Mona Doctor with us, who's on the panel, and maybe she can get us started on a direction of discussion. Mona, would you like to say something? Mona?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
The presentation and the talk that you gave had so much packed in it that I would have to listen to it again. It's amazing how much you have packed in this. And to me, it spoke to me completely and resonated with me. So thank you very much for this. You have a lot of experience, obviously, over the years in this sort of multidisciplinary approach that you have taken. And the question I'd like to ask you is from what I have understood, and my journey has been basically self-taught and also reflection on what is happening to me in my body, and then learning different disciplines. What I've understood, when there is a chronic condition, things have gotten very bad. How do you begin? Because do you start with a multi-pronged approach because sometimes that is needed, or do you go step by step? In my experience, what I've found is sometimes people don't wait because it's taken a long time of not listening to the body, not listening to the symptoms, to come to a point of disease, a chronic disease. And then there's an expectation of a quick turnaround. It may have taken 18 years for something to get as bad, but they can't even give it 18 months. Forget 18 months, 18 weeks. Mm-hmm. So how do you go within your practice? How do you first make the patient understand, or the person understand deeply what you have communicated in this talk, where it speaks to them and where they're willing to give it the time and the patience it takes to complete this journey and return to a balance, or return to a sense of harmony?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mona, for the question. That's actually my daily problem, because it's a cultural problem, because before it becomes an individual problem, it's a cultural problem, because our culture produces a certain expectation of how therapy should work. This disconnection of man out of nature, first, one of the consequences is that we have completely lost our sense of time. Nature doesn't move from one second to the other. You have the seed, and then you have a plant, and you have to wait that it grows up. And that's true for everything, also for chronic diseases. Because as you said before, sometimes they need 18 years to come up until they become so big problem that the person is forced to think about it and to pay attention to it. So the problem is that we have expectations that cannot respond to a reality. And so our culture produces a certain kind of disturbed sense of ourselves, of our processes, and of what also needed to be changed in its complexity, because you cannot think about a chronic disease. Let's think about a digestion problem. You think, okay, I take some probiotics and I resolve the problem. No, the problem has to be seen from every part. So it can be necessary for, obviously, I start with a visit and I ask the behavior, the habits, and what the person usually what the patient is usually doing. What is he eating? When do we eating? When does he eating? At what time? And very often I start from this point. I show him that what he is doing can be changed in a very easy way. So on one thing, change the quality of food, but also change your rhythm. Try to start with the very simple thing. Sorry, I want to tell you many things and I get a little confused. It's about let's say from another point of view. You ask me about chronic disease, how I start. The patient comes in the studio, I ask him everything about his daily life. So I have the opportunity to go inside his daily quotidianity and see if there's something which is not optimal. And then I ask him a kind of hierarchy of what is the most important thing for him. If he is suffering from a digestion problem, he would say, okay, I have pain, I am not regular, I get immediately a sense of bloating or of fullness. And I show him how this happens about physiological reactions inside of the body. And I try to trigger, to understand what is perhaps in his personal case, in his personal situation, wrong what he is doing. I try to give him responsibility immediately because first of all, a therapy, try to heal someone is a collective process. And the little collective is the doctor and the patient. They start together. To think about anything, also not a heavy or a difficult disease, but also little things, need to help the patient that he can start from inside of himself. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what kind of symptoms he has. I ask him always about anything. I start, as I told you in the presentation, I try to go inside his life because everything, as I said, can be a trace to understand something which connects different symptoms. So usually in a chronic disease, the person comes and has something which he tells you immediately what is the problem. But our body, before any symptoms becomes a disease, was trying for many years or many times, was trying to resolve the problem. So I tried to understand the chain of causes, because not very often, it's not the symptom which is dominant, which creates the cause of the illness, of the disbalance. But it's only the last point of a series of physiological and pathophysiological processes, which then manifest in a certain way. So it's much more interesting to try to put them together and to try to understand how they are connected. And our modern medicine is so focused on symptoms that they don't understand that very often the modern medicine, the doctors, we don't understand that the different symptoms are all connected. And this is very interesting in Chinese medicine and also in Indian, in Ayurvedic medicine. Different symptoms form a syndrome. So very often, symptoms which seem not to have any connection one with the other are connected in chains of reactions, of actions, of compensation processes, of trying to resolve the problem. So, to give you an example, if someone is coming with a digestion problem, as I said, I try to understand not only his eating behaviors, and I try to understand what is creating stress in him, because obviously if you're stressed, if your body has inside information of something can happen, the alarm system is activated. This means automatically that the body is focused on the alarm and on the digestion, and not only on the digestion process. So first, this would be a good advice. I tell the person, you have to take your time for eating, and you have to take your time to not doing what we are usually doing. We are on the iPhone when we are eating. So we give different informations to the body, which create confusion inside of it, because our body is like a scanner. If you give him the information of too fat food or too much sugar, what can the body create? It can also only creates fat and diabetes, because this is the information that you give. So if we give good food on all levels, which not means only on the first level, our body and the food as we've intended it usually, but also on the mental level, on the emotional level, all collaborates in every moment inside our body and produces a result. So it's like a scan which infinitely reproduces what it's coming inside. And inside can also come from inside. I mean, we have so many reactions and actions operating inside of us that it's also producing an effect on different other reactions. So in a certain sense, outside influences and inside influences are the same in the elaborated of the information. And it always creates a kind of sum vector where all the vectors are confluating continuously, creating in every moment the best situation, but the best situation at a certain point can become an illness, a disease, a group of symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so responsibility, first to understand that I have created, or the sum total of my existence so far, my choices so far, have somehow led me to this point of dis-ease, and that I need to take ownership from this moment on, and I need to give it, awareness, listening, and time. Is that what you I mean, how do you
Okay.
get your patient to understand or come to that point? Because most of us, as I see today, we do not want to take responsibility. We want to run to a doctor and we want someone to fix us, right? And I think that's probably the root of the problem, because we always want to run to someone and hope that they will fix us. So when a patient comes to you with that hope that you will fix them, how do you slowly place the ownership onto the patient while walking with them and keeping them on the path? How do you do this?
There are different levels of starting points. If you would come in my practice, we can immediately start speaking about awareness, about self-healing, about responsibility to take. And obviously this would be the ideal situation. But our culture is producing what you are saying, is we put the health processes out of us, and the doctor and the medicines have to resolve it. This is okay for an acute problem. If you have an accident, the surgeons are perfect. If you have a bacterial infection, which is not possible to resolve with natural plants, very good that we have the antibiotics and so on. So it's not about excluding something, but it has to do with doing what the person in this moment is able to receive and to make to practice. So there's not a starting point always the same. It's completely changing. Very often, it's also a problem in natural medicine, because very often people come to the doctor who is doing a natural medicine with a natural medicine approach, but the expectation is the same as if they come to the doctor. The only thing that changes is not an antibiotic, but it's a plant. It's some drops or the homeopathic grains or something. It's the same approach, because what is dominant above all this problematic situation, especially in chronic disease and in the treatment of chronic diseases, is that our expectation is not based on anything which is realistic. So I try to pick up the patient and collaborate with him. No, it's not correct to say pick up, because I'm on the same stage. I try to find a language with a patient which is appropriate to him in this situation. So it's not difficult to make understand the patient that his situation came up because he was moving and doing for all these years or for the last months or for the last days in a certain way. Everyone knows it because it has to do with yourself. You can not see it, but if you put a mirror in front of it, and I try always to do this, you will understand it for sure. Then obviously there are different levels of understanding this mechanism, which not only brought to the illness, but with the same mechanism, using that same system, brings to health. So it's not there's something different. It's something in order. It's something like it should be, or it's something which is not in order, and it's something which not should be in this way. Because our body is elaborating what is coming in. It's not interpreting, it's elaborating. Okay, so where to start? I start with one of the things that the patient is telling me, and that can be really everything. He's telling me about his family, his work, what he likes, he doesn't like, what he did before, what he didn't, what he lost, what he would like to do, everything is okay. Because everything is an expression of the person in all his way. It doesn't matter. It's always a little part of it. And the little part is always speaking about the whole. So obviously, the ideal situation is you that you're trying to understand by yourself. You're investing time and studies and probably meditation techniques. So that's an ideal situation, but it's not very often. Now, especially in the West, we are always on a psychological level, and that can be a really, really big problem, because our body is not only psychological. As I try to explain in my presentation, it can be really a trap, because everything can be discussed, everything can go deeper and deeper in the problems, and then you speak about your mother, your father, then it's very limited, this approach, because it's speaking about two generations, speaking about you and the parents and perhaps the grandparents, but then it finished there, and this is not correct, and we don't have to go inside something which not many people have experienced, that they remember different past lives. It's very easy to understand that things are coming up, that they're coming up for genetic. And in the last year, the very important theme is also the epigenetic. Epigenetic means that we have something in our chromosomes and genes that will be activated or disactivated in certain circumstances and depending on the ambient in all aspects. So it's important if your mother gave you the milk or not. It's important if she was smoking. It's important if your mother was very stressed when you were in your body. It's starting from the beginning when we're inside the body of our mother. Then social aspects, cultural aspects, education aspects, environmental aspects. Everything of this ambient creates an activation of what is still inside of us. And it goes much, much longer than what is our parents doing and what our parents in the psychological problems were. It's one aspect, but the psychological approach very often can be extremely helpful. It's not to criticize it at all, but it can be also very limitless, because also many of us are intellectual prepared, but they are not very prepared in understanding that it's only one part of our body. So it can be a limit that you understand it intellectually, but you cannot solve it. You don't think that you, very often it's not possible. You don't have an idea that you should also search from another part. And this is also to do with inner observation, with self-awareness. And everyone can learn from the starting point. Every starting point is a perfect point, but because there's the person. And from this starting point, everyone can go a little more in the direction of self-awareness. And it's not important to call it self-awareness. It's simply understanding what's going on. Yes.
Right.
Sorry,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was great. I'm just, there are so many things you brought up in the talk. And when we were planning this session, I realized that one session was not going to be enough. So I'm hoping that we can also come back and have more discussions, taking several aspects and going deeper. But right now, there were a couple of things that I had written down that I'd like to bring up here. One is this thing where you mentioned that, like, what is health? That health, the status of health it's not something static. It's a dynamic situation. So it's a moving target. So it's different for different people. It can be different for the same person. Sorry. Just 1 second. Sorry. I think I just lost my voice. I was saying that the idea of health, if someone asks you, are you healthy? And similarly, the idea of illness, when someone says, well, if someone asks me and today I'm feeling really good, and I say, yes, I'm healthy, I may have certain disturbances or, something is shifting, or, but overall, I feel energetic, I feel alive. And so, yes, I'm healthy. So this definition of health, and then also the definition of illness, like because of modern medicine or Western medicine, the whole focus on tests and then test results, right? So people are quantifying disease and then using those measures or those figures to say, oh, if my hemoglobin is this much, that must mean that I'm not healthy, or using those external indicators to define, am I healthy or not? So I really love the analogy that you used of the house and of saying that, we're not even sure who is in charge of the house, who is the owner of this house. We don't know them. Michael, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, I don't see you anymore, but so I think my question is that, if you understand that the state of good health is itself changing, what is healthy for a woman in the middle of a menstrual cycle is not the same as what it is at the end of a menstrual cycle, because the body is changing every day. And so therefore the definition of what it means to be healthy also changes and moves. And then, when I'm 40, it's different. When I'm 60, it's different. When I'm 80, it's different. So I think that what I miss in modern medicine or in that approach is, this idea that something is broken and something will fix it. And it's a very static kind of way of looking at things. Whereas what natural medicine or alternative medicine seems to be saying is that the state of health is also shifting constantly. So it's a moving target. And then the other thing that's related to this is this need for us to always find a cause to the effect and say, okay, tell me why this happened, or or to want a label or a diagnosis, and you tell the doctor, tell me what is going on, give it a name. And if I have a name, then it's easier for me to grapple with it, you know. So this whole thing of finding causes and assigning specific causes to specific effects is also a very kind of reductionist kind of way of looking at health as a constantly flowing thing. So how does one reconcile this need for the patient to have, you know, to want to know what is the cause, like give me a cause, and then if I take out that cause, then I should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one question. Wait, Michael, I have a lot of things. So that's one. Second, I just want to quickly share with everyone that my mother is here. My mother's 87, and has been my first healer, and she has taught me a lot about natural medicine. So I'm hoping that she also puts in a word. She has really taught us to be patient and to observe and not want to always figure it out or, you know, have the answer. You know, she makes many statements that have really helped me, but one of the things that she would say is that jo aaya hai wo jayega, what has come will go, you know. So when you say that there's a natural mechanism at work, these are some of those natural laws that, you know, things are flowing all the time. What has manifested today will dissolve tomorrow. And if this enters our understanding, then our approach to health may also change. So this was part of all the first question. The second question is in our interaction with nature, because I feel like, you know, that third level where you said that it's not just within ourselves, it's not just between us, but it's also between us and our environment. And when I first started the Healing with Nature campaign, it was really to try and explore what is that exchange of energy that happens between the human body and the natural environment that helps to maintain that dynamic balance. You know, like my mother's always telling me that the climate and the weather affects you from moment to moment. If there's a slight change in the pressure, your body reacts to it. If there's a slight change in the temperature, your body immediately reacts to it. And so she's always asking me to kind of be patient and allow the weather to change back again before I rush to pop in a medicine or, you know, try to fix what has changed. So I'd like you to speak about that also a little bit. Specifically, yesterday we were on a farm doing farm work, and I sat with several cows. And just sitting there in the presence of these cows and in their time and space, you know, in their rhythm, it completely, you know, it calmed my mind down, and I felt so much energy when I left that cowshed. So that exchange between the human body and between our natural environment, between other living beings and the human species, how have you understood that in terms of maintaining human health? So these are my two questions too.
Very big questions. Many things. Okay, let's start from health changing continuously and changing at different stages and ages. You're completely right. We are so focused on illness and on the definition of understanding what, as if a name could explain a complex situation inside our body. And so, as I said before, it's a cultural problem, and it's not possible. It's an illusion to think that it can be changed and then a paradigm can change in the next future. It's an individual process. Someone will understand it, and many others will not understand it. So this is our time, and we are it's so strong. Also, before social media said it's so strong in the information that's coming up that everything seems that it needs to be fixed, a fixed point to have a reference point. If you think only about research, how it's working, I mentioned it, there's a third person perspective of the researcher. What is he doing in the laboratory? He takes a tissue and puts it on the microscope, and so that thing has to give us the information of a living organism. It's a conceptual error.
Correct.
It gives information, it helps to understand, but it's, for definition, it's obvious that it's limited. No? Okay, so that's the main problem, and this problem incarnates in many, many situations. And first of all, it finds its place in our mind. So we have certain certainties, and they give us a direction, which is not the direction of positive medicine, and absolutely not the direction of what our body is doing in every moment. It's a fixing point on a very big landscape, and it's called sinusitis. It's called colitis or something like that. So it's fixed, but it's always only a aspect where the sign is coming from. No? So also, if it's probably very often an error to be so concentrated of a name and of a number and of codes and of range systems. I'm inside the range, I'm not, I'm outside the range. There's also interesting how these ranges are created. The ranges are created of the average of persons who are doing blood tests. But who is doing a blood test? The blood test is doing someone who is not doing well. And it's not the 25-year-old young man or woman which are in perfect shape and in health. So reference points are giving indication, which is, it's important, obviously. I did also in my medical experience, I worked in the hospital, I did also work in the emergency room. So obviously we have to be grateful also that we have our medicine. Many discussions about health would not be possible if you don't have this kind of health care system operating, with many problems, obviously, but it's too difficult to go in this direction now. So these numbers, these names give a certain information to the patient. And when it comes to you, also to me as a natural health doctor, that's a starting point. Yeah. I usually try not to lose time with these descriptions. So I ask the patient to send me everything on email days before. So I have all the names and codecs and ranges I have seen before. So I can concentrate on how the person is living his condition, his disease, if it's a disease or it's only a disbalance. So it makes no sense to go against this description, at least in the Western world. We have to start always from this point. But you have also to understand then, speaking about it, this frame, it's possible to make understand the patient that he is the element where all this is working and that he can always do a little better. So, as I said before, the starting point is different, but the mechanism and the approach, the healing approach is always the same. Try to understand that the patient, try to communicate that the patient understands that he can do something for it. That's the point. So it doesn't matter how their name is, because I try to help him to focus on what he can do. And I tell him immediately that in this collective healing process, there's one part that I will completely have the responsibility that will change step by step in the healing process, but that he hasn't to think about it. I tell him not to think about ranges, to a reference word and something. That's my part. So I try to help him that he can do something for the healing process. And that can be very different, very simple, as I said before, eat better, do exercise, try to sleep better, something like that. But I always give him some first introduction to relaxation techniques. I tell them very often to observe how the respiration is working and to connect the thought, I'm doing inspiration, I'm expirating, to connect it to the natural respiration process, not to modify it, no technique, only observing. And sometimes they start immediately in my practice, and then I ask them to do it during the day. And if there's a patient who is already interested in this kind of technique, that's a part of Vienna. She is also, if we were both interesting and we are both practicing since more than 30 years. I met Vienna in the university, and we did both medicine and did both history of the religion of India, so you can imagine, and anthropology. She finished as a medical anthropologist, and I finished as a medical doctor. But you can understand that this was always our focus. So we divided a little our work inside the studio. So if someone wants to know about meditation techniques, respiration techniques, that's a part of Vienna. I think it could be interesting to hear also her share her experience inside our practice. So what your mother said, what has come will go. I completely agree. But you have to be very, very capable not to put filters inside. That's a problem. Who can do this? If you're always in your mind, you cannot let the flow easily let flowing. Okay? So in theory, I completely agree. And you still said since you're a little child, little girl, you have this input and your sensibility increased and your experience increased. So obviously you have your situation is different than that of many others. To let it flow, very often I think our culture doesn't permit it. I cannot see the patient every day, every hour. I'm not a coach, always a personal coach. So he has to do a lot by himself. And that is a problem because very often they go out of the studio, they feel they are convinced. I write some tasks and then I always ask them to give me a call or to send me a feedback over a few days. And 8 of 10 times they didn't do anything or very little. So they will not have the patience. They will at the beginning, at least in the beginning, they will not have the understanding that there are natural processes that need time. So we have to accept it and try to find a way to go inside them and then step by step work on the situation.
Great.
Perhaps your mother is coming?
Yes, my mother's here. She will be joining us. I just want to give chance to a couple of people in the audience who have typed up some questions. Maybe we can start with Shalini and then go over to Rams Reddy. Shalini, would you like to, if you're still with us? Yeah, Shalini, would you like to speak now?
Thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this absolutely beautiful conversation. And thank you to the doctor for having presented his very deep and very, very amazing thoughts. Dr. Held, congratulations. You reached out to in the audience, but what you said really rang a bell inside me. I'm really, really intrigued. I'm a non-medical doctor, so I have a PhD, but in management. And I'm very intrigued with understanding what PNIE is about and can a non-medical person pursue the studies. I Google searched while you were talking about it and Google didn't help me. So one, I'd like to understand that. And two, I do practice trying to control thoughts, but I am in specific going to ask you a question by a person who has depressive tendencies. And how does one facilitate a change of the thoughts? And in my understanding, the the rest of the diet patterns and the immunology aspects are a wee bit under control, but how do you help the person maintain a more balance in their thought processes? Can you shed some light on these two issues, please?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Change of thoughts, that's the problem. And if there's an illness like a depression, I can give you a very good example of how symptoms can appear on one place. In this case, depression, we are usually localization it in the head. It's a problem of the mind. But very often, it's not a complete view of really it's going on. I will try to explain it better. A depression, no, I have one step back. Our digestive tract is, perhaps you know it, also called the second brain. And this is much truer as we usually know it. This, the brain mechanism, the intestine is structured like our brain is structured. And the information which is coming up from the intestine tract to the brain, from the gut to the brain, we speak about gut-brain axis, are 10 times more than from the brain to the intestine and to the gut. So the information in the intestine is collecting information of all the processes. And you mentioned the immune system. I tell you only that the immune system is 80% connected to the digestive tract.
Right.
So if there's a depression, we have also another diagnostic tool and another completely different therapeutic approach of how to approach a depression situation. Because this second brain is very, very sensible to inflammation processes. And these inflammation processes have so strong impact on all the neurotransmitter system, especially on cortisol and on adrenaline, as I mentioned before, but in a completely different way. It has to do with healing processes. So these stress hormones are increasing because they want to heal the inflammation. So if there's an inflammation inside of us, these processes are strictly directed in different directions and mainly from the intestine to the brain. So today, depression is considered an inflammation disease and needs to be approached on different levels and not only on a psychological, or very often it's also necessary. Also, if they don't work statistically very well, the antidepressants substances in the pharmacies. So I want to explain a little better what this digestion tract is doing. They are the brain, the second brain, and there's something which we discovered only in the last years, which is called microbiome. The microbiome is the composition of the microbiota, which are the bacteria inside our digestion tracts. This microbiota, with this group, this enormous number of bacteria, are more than the double of cells than the cells of our body. So there is something which is non-human, which is the basic for human processes. And that's also an answer what Manisha asked before, the interaction of nature with us. And there's also the inner nature, which has this expression in the microbiome. And that's the microbiome of the intestine, the microbiome of the skin, of the bladder, of the sinus, of everything has its microbiome. And this microbiome has a strong impact and effect on our health in all its expressions. So depression is very often connected to an alteration of the microbiome. I explain myself better. Microbiota are the bacteria, and microbiome are the genetic, the genes of all this. This is a genetic part of it. So we can measure with a simple test, a stool test, the genetic and the composition of this microbiome. In depression, it's very often transformed to inflammation. And that's a good example of what I tried to explain before. Our body is reacting consciously to all the inputs that it's receiving. And it's elaborating it always in the best possible way. If our food, here's a good example also with the food, if the food is too fat and too fatty and it's not a good composition, our body, these bacteria, are waiting, they are specialized. Some like fatty food and many of them like sugar. Though this will grow up and the other ones will low down. So they cannot do their function anymore. And this brings, not because there's someone bad or something wants to bad inside the body, but it's simply following the information which enters. For the depression, this means it creates an overstimulation of inflammation processes on the level of the mucosa, of the, I don't know how I say, the mucosa, the skin
Mucus.
inside.
Yeah.
Mucus, yeah. Mucus, sorry, I didn't speak English for so much time. So the mucosas. The mucosas get irritating, and this produces below the mucosas an infinite of reactions to resolve the problem. And our immune system gets overstimulated, and this overstimulating costs energy on the energy level. And if we have a problem, unfortunately, it doesn't mean that we have more energy than to resolve this extra energy necessity. It means that we consume our energy, and then we have a problem also, if it's going on for a long time, on other levels, on other parts of the body, because the energy level is not where it should be. It's working on the most important level, which is the acute inflammation process. So this alteration not only creates a kind of weakness in our complexity of physiological processes, but in the case of depression, it creates an alteration of neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters are working, unfortunately, they're going to stimulate the alarm system. And also this creates weakness. So many different mechanism which brings to stronger weakness. And if there's an outer situation that someone is depressed because he lost his job or he has a problem, or very often it has to do with inner processes, they don't even can define exactly what the reason is. But obviously this weakness doesn't help. So it's not easy to create a change of thoughts in a chronic, strong depression. It's not so difficult when you start in the first level in the beginning, or it's not so strong, the intensity of the depression. But if someone has a strong depression, it's necessary to start with a physical problem. So in my experience, to optimize things which have apparently nothing to do with the depression, which is our mind process, it's possible to work on it, optimizing the organism in other points. And if the person then has a little more energy, then you can help him to start to think about changing the thoughts. Because before, he has not the possibility to apply. Also, if he's prepared intellectually and he can understand everything, there's this place to start. Me as a doctor, I have to try to create the first step. So the first step is optimize other things, create some kind of confidence that something can change, and then on this base, eventually try to put in something which goes into meditation techniques or relaxation techniques.
Very interesting. That's so fascinating. Dr. Michael Held, this is amazing, the explanation you've just given. Wonderful. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Shalini. It was a pleasure.
I would want to know later how one can reach you, and sitting in India or the US where this patient is, how we can approach you for treatment.
Okay. I'm dedicated mostly to my work, so I opened my practice. I will tell you another time. I opened as a new practice along with my wife. Before I had a small clinic, there were different professionals inside, but I didn't feel anymore. It wasn't actual anymore. So I decided to be alone with Vienna, and we have a network of outer professionals. I started a little more than 1 year ago, and I still don't have a website, but I was trying to put my website finally before this event, and I didn't succeed. But in the next months, there will be the website, there will be the possibility to contact me, and there will be also our seminar and the other things that I publicated and I did. So this was also, Manisha, thank you, because it's up to you if there will be finally a website of my own and something of the work. Okay.
For sure.
And,
I'd just like to take it over to Rams Reddy, who's waiting, and then also Amol Falke, who has a question. And then after we've spoken to these two, maybe we can have Mom also talk to you, because I think that interaction between you and my mother is also going to be very interesting. So Rams, would you like to ask your question? Are you still with us? I don't really see them here anymore. Maybe Amol, would you like to go next?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Michael, for unfolding this fascinating world and taking us slowly through this. I listened to your last answer. Some parts I didn't get. So you meant, you said many times that particularly related to digestions. I mean, and it is digestion of many things. So you said that the body actually elaborates the inputs it gets, or the signal it gets. So would you actually explain it a little more?
That's very easy, Amol. I try to explain it in an easy way. So think about if you have cold, what would you do? You would try to take a jacket or a pullover. You will do something, no? Or if it's rainy, you will put an umbrella. You would open an umbrella. If you don't have an umbrella, you would take your jacket and put it over your hand. And if you don't have over your head, and if you don't have the jacket, you will put your hands on it. Our body always reacts to the input which is coming in. So on the food level, it means it doesn't make any difference for our body how the body reacts, because it's only it's always transforming the inputs which gets in every moment. And there are so many inputs. It seems that we rationally can elaborate in 1 second 40 signals. I explain myself better. If you think now what you are perceiving, you can see me, you see Manisha, you see her mother, we read the names, then perhaps you hear outside the window that a car is passing. We can consciously understand a small amount of information which in every moment is coming on us. There are studies which say that our sensory cells, there are more than 40 million information every second. So on one side, we have 40 cognitive processes and 40 million elaboration processes, because our body, it doesn't mind if it hears or understands or knows. It works always. As the mother of Manisha said before, it comes in and it goes out. So the question is one step before. We have to pay attention about the quality of the inputs, because for our body, it's the same. It will always work with everything which comes inside. And so it has, you can start from a very easy way. So if a Roma is disturbing you, close the window. So if start with, try to understand what you can do in this very moment. And don't think about what you should do. Work on what is possible now in this moment. That's to start. And for the, I think it can be very interesting to explain better this gut-brain axis and the microbiome, but it can be the seminar for, if you're interested in it, because it's so amazing that these little beings, these little microbes, these bacteria have so a strong impact, not only of the digestion tract, but also about our thinking. There are studies which shows that anxious and not only depression and panic attacks have to do with a certain composition of this microbiome. This doesn't mean that this is the only reason. It's a cofactor inside of it. But if you work on the cofactor, it's more easy to change it.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. That's really beautiful. As you have said, we are looking forward. I mean, I had asked one question about whether I will get the reading or listening material more from you.
I will do, promise.
And,
Sorry
yeah.
for that.
And so does that mean, I mean, just to elaborate, in our culture, like food or anna, we call it, has a different significance. Like whatever inputs taken by all the senses is called as food. And yeah, and it doesn't mean that only food that we eat is called as food. So does this mean that, you know, if we want to possibly, I mean, one of the factor in improving digestion could be like you just sit and attentively do just only eating and
no.
try to
Okay, Amol, that's a dangerous question because you put
okay.
me on a place where I love to stay. It's you know, when I finished a few weeks ago, I finished a master degree in this it's called PNEI, psycho neuroendocrine immunology. But I finished it, and my master work was about the comparison of this PNEI systemic approach with the Samkhya system. And I'm not an expert in it, but I was fascinating about it. So what I was speaking about, this this comparison in this work which I presented as an end of the master, was that every part of our body in its whole needs a specific kind of food. And I think it's very well explained in Samkhya when it speaks about the, sorry, I don't remember exactly the English name, sheets, I think, the 5 sheets, which is Anandamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha.
Panchakosh.
The 5, yeah. So that's why I said this is a integrating question what you did, because that's really the very important thing. We have to think about the food for every level, and that's completely ignored in our modern lifestyle. And unfortunately, it seems that we succeed, the Western world succeed to export this culture in all over the world. But I'm very happy that you speak about it. Yeah, we should think about the right food on every level. And perhaps it's interesting to say that the inner sheet, which is the Anandamaya Kosha, is existing also on all levels. So the Annamaya Kosha has its own happiness, his own bliss, you can say. And so also the Prana and the Mano and the Vishyana Maya Kosha, everyone has his own food and his own bliss. So very often we are completely in the outer sheet. We are in the Annamaya Kosha. And that's also, you can see the difference between the Western approach and the Indian approach, how to see it. Because in the Annamaya Kosha, if you studied it, it has to do immediately with nature. It's not food in my body. The idea of body in nature changed completely because it means it's me inside the body of Mother Earth. So completely different. It has nothing to do, no, it's not correct. It's the lowest level of where we are working in modern medicine, but I didn't say that. so
that's, yeah, I think definitely, Michael, if you have time, I think there are several of us who would like to take, you know, subtopics from the things that you have mentioned today and then go deeper into that. Maybe have a study group with you, or, you know, to really, and also the fact that you have studied and you have so much knowledge about the Indian ways of looking at things. I think for us sitting here in India, it would be a great interaction to have with you and, you know, rediscover our own heritage in that way.
Rediscover,
so,
not.
Yeah,
I think it can be very, very interesting, and I would like to learn much from you. Yeah.
So, I mean, at this point, I think I just also like to invite my mother, Dr. Madhuri Sheth, and see if she has something to add, something to say. She has been witnessing the whole Revive kind of journey, and maybe she's got something to add here. She has, if I can just mention, she has come from a healing tradition. My grandfather was a healer, and my mother has looked after 3 severely ill relatives. So her elder sister, who was bedridden for 7 years, my father's elder brother, who suffered from epilepsy and was quite, you know, challenged by that. And then now she looks after her youngest sister, who suffers from schizophrenia. So she's had this, you know, lifelong experience of care and healing. So she has quite a lot of experience that she can share with us. And so, Ma, would you like to say something?
If there are any other questions?
No, we've covered the questions. It's your turn now. Yeah.
No,
You'll have to come forward. Come and sit on this chair. Come sit on this chair.
Namaste, Michael.
Namaste,
Nice
namaste.
listening to you, and I'm so happy to see that on several points we are on the same wavelength. So I don't have to, you know, elaborate as to what it is. But what I wanted to share is that one or two things. One, when we talk of healing, I think the listeners or the public, I feel that when we talk of healing, we are talking of healing from suffering. And I feel what happens is that instead of thinking that healing is for suffering, a lot of assumptions creep in. For instance, people think that if you heal yourself, then you will live indefinitely. The assumption is that we can avoid death. It is not spoken about, but people think that you can prolong your life very much, you know. So I feel that this is something that has to go into our upbringing. Like, for instance, Manisha gave this example that I said that what comes will go. Now, what comes will go, it's okay, as far as whatever is you're suffering from. But at the same time, you have also to remember that if you have come, you also have to go. It's not only somebody else. If you have come, you also have to go. That, you see, it is forgotten that death is process. It's a process of life. Death is a process of life, and therefore we have to accept it. See, the mistake that happens in our upbringing is that death is not to be talked about. In most societies, there are some tribal societies and all where they very openly talk of death. And in fact, there are some tribal societies where the child is born as they cry, but when somebody dies, they celebrate, you know. But most of the time in our so-called civilized world, death is considered nothing to be talked about, as if we are going to live. True, our true self lives indefinitely, there is no doubt about it. But body is a form. That form has to, if it has come, it has to change also. It has to undergo its own processes. So I just want to share this, that because in our upbringing, these things are not brought about, So that gives a lot of misunderstanding of the processes of healing also.
Thank you very much. I completely agree. And that's a huge problem, that our society doesn't speak about the end, doesn't speak about death. And there's also the opportunity lost, because if there's an illness, it brings you to the point that this disturbing factor can help you to change the point of view and to get you more aware about not only that we will leave this world and we have a certain time that most of us don't know how much time they have.
Yeah.
So not to use this, the illness as another kind of information, as I told before to Amol, sorry if I don't say the name in the right way, is that this input of the illness, of a disbalance, can be the starting point to create balance. So this is and who is the biggest advisor in every moment? It's knowing that we are dying every moment and that we will definitely disappear. So we are not using it because it can also relativize what is happening to us. Because there's in South America, Indians from South America, they use the death as a consultant. So they said, if I have a problem, I ask my death if my moment is come. So I don't have a problem because it will finish. But if he said the time is not arrived, I have still time to live, I can afford the situation, I can change it. So no problem. So, so to use that as an advisor, it's a strong thing for many of us because we are not used. We live in an eternal young society that's producing a culture. The impact is so strong that also persons which authentically have an interest to understand much more about them, it's very, very hard. There are so many inputs and so many deviations. So also if they start, it's not easy to realize something which concrete. I call this horizontal knowledge or vertical knowledge. We have to bring our knowledge down inside of us. And it doesn't depend on how much it is. It's okay. That's what we start about. And I completely agree.
Another point that I think we don't bring it to the notice of whoever we are responsible, especially children as parents, is, as you mentioned, you see, we are getting unlimited information through our sources. And our body is a constantly changing and universe by itself.
Yeah, obviously.
So I think that we try to simplify it in ways that we hardly understand ourselves, We are every human being, every life form is a universe by itself. And therefore, it's tremendously complicated. And so we have to remember our limitations. That, in order to understand that complexity, first of all, I feel that we have to be with itself, with the universe.
Yeah. That's what is important, what became important for me.
We don't hear you anymore.
I didn't do nothing.
You went mute for a minute.
Do you hear me now?
I can hear, I mean, we can hear him. Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Manisha, do you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I go ahead? Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah, you're right. It's incredible complicated, but it's so complicated and too big that we have to start from where we are, from the smallest point. And that's everyone for ourselves. So it's important for me to when I understood that it's so a big change in society, and that also old knowledge which remains intact needs to be rediscovered. It's not working anymore. You know, India is the country, the subcontinent, which has probably most knowledge, traditional knowledge, which still is living. You have a big part of society is doing the rites every day, and so you're open to meditation. So, and also in India, it's changing. We have to rediscover. We have to rediscover traditional knowledge in a new clothes. We have to understand what is now to how do we need to apply it. And so it's a big change. In this big change, I think we have to start everyone by its own. And we are very fortunate, like we are here now in this group, that we can share our experience together. Because so it's important for me. So, you know, this was what I was presenting today was obviously inside of me, but I didn't know it. I don't explain it to myself usually. I explain it when I speak to patients, but it was important for me to sum it up and so it's much more clear also for me. But my main interest is not so much about Buddhism, Hinduism. I love them. I feel they're very comfortable. This is my main reference point. But I also studied Western philosophy and different Western traditions. And I'm completely convinced that they lost their lympha, I don't know, lympha, you know, the lymphatic system, the vital energy. So we need to try to find something else. And so the reference points are, we lost them and we will lose them in the next future still more. So we have to start from our experience, try to share it, try not to interpret it too much, because everyone has his limited condition, and we are apparently, obviously, it's not of better, more worthy or less worthy. It means that we have different competency, different possibilities to understand and to integrate knowledge and to integrate ourselves in the certain context. So, but everyone can start in a very easy and always integrated way. If I understand that the dog which is on the road can suffer and needs to have food, I give him food. So I connect with what I see in my surroundings. I connect directly, I react, and this means not a simply reaction, it becomes responsive. And this responsivity changed completely. One is a passive act, and it means perhaps today I give the dog the food, and tomorrow, now I have to do it, and I have other problems. So if it becomes more consciously, you will feed what you find around. And it's not about a lot or nothing or little. It's about what you can give, share it. Try.
That's beautiful. Your distinction between reaction and response. Yeah. I think that is really wonderful. Yeah. Because what you're saying is really speaking, okay, whatever happens, we have to see whether we are reacting or whether we are responding. Yeah.
I think I'm sorry to cut short this incredible conversation, Michael, but we are now at 6:05 and it's been 2 hours. So I think this would be a good point to start wrapping up. We have about 17 people with us. I have shared your email address. If anybody wants to connect with you directly, they might do that. Maybe Shalini. A few of them have asked about PNEI and how they can study it themselves. So that may be also something that they may want to ask you about. There are a couple of other questions which we can't take right away, but maybe in the next session. So I'll come back to you. If any of you who are in the audience right now have ideas about more specific topics that you would like to have a talk by Dr. Held, please reach out to me at ecoexist@gmail.com. And we can, if that's okay, we can stop here now, Dr. Held. I want to thank you on everybody's behalf.
Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure and an incredible experience for me too.
We have been waiting for this conversation for many, many months. So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you from Roma. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Very nice. No? Very much on the same wavelength. Chalo.